Hi everybody and welcome to Nucleonis Studios. My name is Andrew and in today's tutorial we are going to be covering how to work with clouds within Vue. We are working with Vue xStream 2014.6 and in today's lesson we are going to cover three aspects of clouds within Vue. Aspect number one, of course, is the cloud tab within the atmosphere editor. Aspect number two is going to be working with the advanced cloud material editor that you will find when you double click on the cloud preview here within the cloud tab of the atmosphere editor. And the third aspect, of course, that we're going to be working with is the MetaClouds, where you can right click and select and create a cloud and work with those clouds with the advanced material cloud material editor as well. And I'm also going to explain how to add additional spheres and how to work with these spheres and manipulate these spheres, although some might find this a primitive and very logical process, others might not know, and so we'll get into a quick detail of that as well. So the very first thing we're going to start up with is just, we're going to quickly cover the MetaClouds because it's just a small area. This won't be a very long tutorial today, it's just, there's not very much to cover. I am going to be doing a very extensive tutorial on clouds, in which tutorial I will show you how to make clouds like this guy. Or like this guy here. Both clouds look like an explosion or something out of maybe a movie. But if you live in the prairies in either Canada or the United States of America, you will find clouds like this on a regular basis when there's a nice big storm front coming in, and they're referred to as cumulus clouds and cumulonimbus clouds. This one's here is just a cumulus, and they're determined, of course, by their height. And this is a cumulonimbus cloud. This one's a much more intense cloud, and this one here is also cumulonimbus. Again, very intense. And the details that we're going to be focusing on in the advanced tutorial series, of course, which will be free on YouTube as well, will be the details that you're seeing right in here. What most people refer to as cauliflower clouds, or the aspect of the clouds that's a cauliflower look. That is very hard to achieve in any digital software without using actual real clouds. And so I'm going to give everyone a tutorial series on how to get HD quality clouds, cumulonimbus clouds that you can use in post-production for movies and for your own personal pictures and images. Alright, so before we get into the advanced cloud editor and or advanced cloud material editor and the cloud editor within the atmosphere editor, the first thing we're going to cover right now is the material, or the MetaClouds and the MetaClouds material. So starting off at the top here, I want to point out that each MetaCloud is comprised of spheres. And the way that they work right now is that if you only have a certain number of spheres, that number is 2, you can add more spheres to your collection. And you can do that the same way you created your MetaCloud, by left-clicking and adding more spheres. Right, and if we look off in the distance, I've just added more spheres and made the cloud look like, you know, a little, maybe some smoke's coming off in the distance, or just some wisp of cloud off in the distance. So that covers that. If you delete everything except for one sphere, you're going to notice that you can't actually add another cloud, another layer. So the moral of the story here, of course, is to not delete all of the spheres, to leave 2 spheres. I'm just going to go back to the way it was when we started. You'll notice that each one of these spheres has properties. You can go into each sphere and you can adjust the size of each sphere, and you can even, if you want, go in and adjust the atmosphere, the advanced material cloud or advanced cloud material editor for each individual sphere. Alright, and you can do that by selecting the sphere and double clicking on it. It's going to be resource intensive, but if you're looking for something that's a cloudscape, something with some really detailed clouds, that's going to be something that's very useful for you. Of course, if you want to adjust them as a whole, just click on the layered cumulus or whatever MetaCloud you've chosen, the top of its layer, and double click on it. And in here you're going to find the Advanced Cloud Material Editor. This is the Advanced Cloud Material Editor, even though up top here it doesn't say so. That's exactly what it is. This is just a different version of it. there are 2 versions within Vue of the Advanced Cloud Material Editor. All the settings are going to be almost identical. It's going to look almost identical. The only difference is there are going to be a couple differences, and of course you'll see that later when I show you from the Cloud tab. So in here you'll see all the different settings that you have for the cloud. We're going to first go over and cover lighting and effects. In here you can do things like turbulence, rotation, and cycling, which do some cool little things to your clouds. We're not actually going to do that today. But each of those you can also go into and edit within the with their own little editors, and you can change the amount of scale of the cycling and the amount of the cycling. And the rotation, same details. You can do the same thing. You can adjust how it rotates, where it rotates, how much it rotates. And again, with the turbulence, you can do some other things as well. You can go in and adjust the scale of the turbulence, or how much turbulence there is. What size the turbulence affects. The amplitude, or how much turbulence. The harmonics, another word for noise. You can also work with things like how you're working with that turbulence. You can do additive, you can do blending, you can do a variable roughness, a max, min, and multiply. You're probably familiar with these if you've worked with programs like Photoshop. Alright, so those are other options. You got different types of noise that you can work with. In here you're going to find lots of options, and these are quite useful when you want to get a cloud that looks a specific way. So for example, if you work with cracks, then you're going to get your cloud's turbulence is going to be, it's not going to just be turbulence, it's going to be cracks of turbulence, and you can actually see it updated right away. It's not something you're going to look at and you're going to notice too much from a distance, but you will notice that if you work with that in the future. We're not going to get into that in this tutorial series, but in the advanced tutorial series on clouds, I will cover that. So right here we're going to look at the lighting model, and this is just gives you the ability to go back and use older versions of the cloud objects. Generally, for the most part, people don't even use MetaClouds anymore because the cloud editor that comes within the Atmosphere editor is just so extraordinary that there's not really much of a need for MetaClouds. But the one main use for MetaClouds is when you want to make cloudscapes and you want clouds to look a specific way, you want them to be a specific size, you want their spheres to be arranged in a specific direction, you want, tufts of cloud in an exact place, then you're going to use a MetaCloud. And of course, you still have the same versatility with MetaClouds that you would have with the Advanced Material Editor, the Advanced Cloud Editor within the Cloud tab and with the clouds as well. In here you're going to find all kinds of different settings, from the uniformity, variation, roughness, scaling, amounts, feathers. Those are all your detail settings. Those are things that are going to adjust how your actual tufts of clouds are going to look. And then over here you're going to have the cloud as a whole, the general settings. And when I say as a whole, I'm not talking about general settings. I'm saying this is the whole cloud, the cloud itself. So the entire cloud. So if I were to have one sphere, that is the whole cloud. And that one sphere, all of these settings under general affect just that one sphere. However, in the detail settings, all of these settings affect that sphere differently than the settings in the general settings. Feathers, for example. Feathers create subclouds within that one sphere. They'll create little chunks of cloud that tuft out. And when you then start adjusting all the settings below that, that's going to adjust the feathers differently. Right? So it's going to affect the feathers. The roughness, for example, is going to affect the cloud as a whole, but it's also going to affect the feathers. The variations will affect the feathers, but the variations won't generally and necessarily affect those general settings as a whole. Now the sharpness will affect the cloud as a whole. It will not affect the feathers in the same way that it'll affect the cloud as a whole. I don't know if I'm quite making sense, but what I do know is when you play around with these settings, and it will take you a few months to kind of get them down because they are really, there's a lot of features here to work with. When you do play with these settings, it'll make sense to you what I'm saying, that the settings within the general settings don't necessarily affect detail settings and vice versa. Alright? Some detail settings sometimes will create subclouds, and the settings within the detail settings will adjust those subclouds. But those settings won't necessarily adjust the general settings. Over here in your density production, this is just this gives you the ability to adjust your density. You can go in here and edit the function, and that'll bring up the function editor, and you can make all kinds of different adjustments that'll work with your density. You can have your density, say you wanted to make, I don't know, a variable density, and you wanted that variable density to be 0.713, and you wanted that to be 0.713 at the bottom of the cloud and 0.92 at the top, or 9.2 at the top. 9.2 at the top. You could do that within the function editor. You can Also work with the filters and make adjustments to the filters that also will adjust the way the density is displayed on your cloud layers. So great little features within the Advanced Cloud Material Editor that allow you to work with your MetaClouds and give you some really interesting results. Alright, so that covers the MetaCloud. The next thing we're going to next thing we're going to cover here is in the Atmosphere Editor. In the Atmosphere Editor, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to point out that when you add, you're going to have different options. You're going to have Cumulus, you're going to have MetaClouds, Other Clouds, Spectral Clouds, Spectral 2, Stratus, Volumetric Clouds. Every one of these clouds are different. They're presets, and some of them are different presets than the others. Some of them use different cloud models. Go ahead and experiment with them. But what we're going to do for today is we're going to work with this lovely stretched cumulus right here in the Spectral 2. And the reason why I'm choosing that is it's the only cloud types that give access to all the options. Okay, if you go into Spectral 1, these clouds don't give you access to all the options. You'll notice that feathers and sharpness are both blocked out. Okay, so altitude. Two things that people get confused very often is altitude and height. What's the difference between altitude and height? It sounds like the same thing to me. Well, altitude is actually the height of the cloud from the ground. So if I put it at 100 meters, that's 100 meters off the ground. That's when the cloud starts being a cloud, at 100 meters. And then the height is actually the thickness of the cloud, how high it is from that point further upward. All right, so 300 meters, I'm going to make it 500 meters, and you're going to notice vertically that cloud becomes thicker. And if I make it 1,000 meters, then vertically that cloud becomes thicker. All right. So that's the height. And again, there is no width or length. There is no lateral axis of the clouds. When you are using clouds, it is a procedural cloud. It works only procedurally. However, if you were to click Limit Cloud to Zone, that's going to limit the cloud to a specific zone. So I'm going to go ahead and select this this stretched cumulus here, and I'm going to limit it to the zone. And you're going to notice right away that cloud is now limited to a zone. Now, I don't like the width of this cloud anymore, but there's no width options over here. So how do I go ahead and adjust this so that I can actually work with making this cloud a little wider? Well, it's simple. This little guy here, Move Cloud Layer or Move Limiting Zone. That's what you're doing when you move right now. So if I were to move this, right, I'm moving the cloud, I'm moving the limiting zone. That's great, but I want to make this bigger. So I click on that, and suddenly it becomes selectable. I can actually select the cloud layer, the zone, sorry, and I just resized the zone. I made it bigger. Okay, and of course the fall off is going to adjust the density around the edges. All right, so if I were to go up over the top here, if I were to go up over the top and I were to take a render of that, and we are working with a little bit large of a cloud. I'm just going to resize this cloud. This is way too big. And of course, if you like, you can also move your camera up quite quickly just by doing that, which I'm doing. Alright, so I'm just going to look here. Now you see how this cloud, it looks pretty cloud-like. It's not totally round, it's not totally square, which is good. Hang on, actually. Which is good. I mean, that's what you want the cloud to look like. But if I were to cut off this fall-off zone, the cloud's going to be completely symmetrically round. Now the angle that we're at right now doesn't actually allow you to see that. Okay, so you see how the edges they're very sharp, oops. They're very, come on. You can see how the edges are very sharp. It's unrealistic. Clouds don't look like that in real life. They don't have edges like that. That's why we have this fall-off zone. We're able to actually go in and adjust that so the cloud's edges don't quite look like that. And of course, the more cover you have, the larger you're going to have your zone at. there's no such thing as 500%, so we have a little bit of a glitch. Unfortunately, I'm working with a video card that's not actually supported by Vue, so we're having a bit of a glitch here. So when you ever have a glitch working with Vue, nice and easy way to fix it is to go ahead and save. And purge memory. And if that doesn't work, then you can close and reopen. It's good that we get little errors like this. We can actually demonstrate how to resolve problems usually quite quickly. That's really weird what's going on with that. Okay, that's what the stretch cumulus should look like. That's good. We're going to go with this dense cumulus layer mark with it instead because I'm not quite getting the desired effect here. There we go. It appears that it wasn't an error at all. It was just the fact that I'm working with the wrong kind of cloud layer. You notice how the edges in this, again, like we were just discussing there, the edges are in fact very sharp, and so you want to go ahead and just put some softening, and that'll cut off the edges, but it'll give little edge points that'll make the cloud look more realistic and more like an actual cloud, and less like it was man-made. Okay, and that's quite useful. All right, that covers that. So cover, as you can see, that covers that. Cover is the amount of cloud that actually is covered. All right, is the amount of cloud that you're actually getting in your area of cloud, or in your cloud layer. The amount of ground cover, if you were, the amount of cover. Okay, so the less cover there is, the more breaks in the cloud there's going to be. The more cover there is, the less breaks. You can always go above the limitations, so if you want, you can go 200%. Okay. Density is the density of the cloud. So just for demonstration's sake, I'm going to bring the density down to 37%, and you can practically see through the cloud. Right, little wisps of cloud there, and it looks nice, you know, but you can practically see through it. And so increasing the density up to 500% or 1,000, or however high you want to go, will increase the density of the cloud. And of course, in so doing, will make the cloud non-transparent. Right, the fibers of the cloud are close together, and therefore also will make the light harder to pass through when working with shadow density, with your density of your shadows down here at the bottom. So increasing the shadow density all the way up is great, and you'll have shadows from the clouds when the sun's over the top, provided that your density is actually enough to restrict light from passing through. Opacity is just the opacity of the cloud from the bottom, or from aspects, from areas of the cloud where you'll be seeing light, ambient light reflect, right? So that's your opacity. Essentially, opacity means the ability to see through, or lack of being able to see through. Opaqueness, right? So if I were to drop the opaqueness down, right, the cloud's still there. Not see-through. Why did I say see-through? It's like contrast, if you will, right? So if I drop the opacity down, I can't really do this from above, so let's do this from below. If I come down here, and then we take a render, you see that cloud it doesn't look like a cloud, right? It does not look at all like a cloud because the opacity is so high that there's no cloudness to it. It doesn't look like a cloud, but when I bring the opacity up, then it starts to look like an actual cloud. I mean, a cloud doesn't have to always have high opacity. There'll be situations where a cloud will have 0 opacity, right? Or 26% opacity. It depends on the cloud, but in this situation, this cloud does not look effective without some level of opacity, right? And opacity is generally viewable from the ground. When you're doing clouds from above, don't worry about opacity. Then you want to start working with ambient lighting. I do apologize if I'm speaking a little too quickly, but you can go ahead and slow down the video. You should be able to hear what I'm saying if you do so. Ambient lighting should give you the ability to increase the light on the cloud all around. All right. Allows the lighting from the scene to actually affect the clouds directly as well. Altitude variations is exactly what it sounds like. Variations in the altitude. As soon as I drop that altitude variations, you saw the wisps that were going up disappear. I'll put that back on, and those wisps are right back. And you can, of course, always go over on the slider and make it look even more dense. Right? I'm going to go into the detail amount here. I'm going to put that up to 200%. Details of the sharpness of the features that you're looking at. Not the sharpness. Details are the features that you're looking at. So when you increase the details, you're increasing the amount of features within the cloud. This can include the amount of feathers, but not usually. Usually it'll actually break the cloud off into other separate pieces, several hundred pieces, and basically it'll break the cloud off into dozens of pieces and then break those pieces off into more pieces the higher up you increase the details. Right? For this I don't really need any details. I'm just going to keep it down to like 34%. If you put it down too low, the cloud's not going to look like a cloud. It's going to look like a blob in the sky. So don't put it too low. Alright, sharpness will adjust the sharpness of the cloud pieces. Right? Very useful when you're trying to make cumulus clouds. I'm going to actually turn the opacity down. And yeah, let's do variations. Shadow density doesn't need to be so high. Shadow density, of course, is the way the cloud affects lighting towards the ground. So if the light passes through the cloud and hits the cloud and the cloud is dense, the density of the shadow will be based on the shadow density and, of course, the density of the cloud. If I had 10,000 density on, I'm not going to do that because that would slow my computer down. But if I had 10,000 density, it would be pretty much the same as if I had a polygon in the sky. It would be blocking the light out completely from the ground. Of course, ambient lighting is still affected, so if you have high ambient lighting in your scene, like this, then of course your ground is going to be quite visible. Right? But if your lighting is mostly coming from the sunlight, then a cloud is going to block it off. Alright. Generally, for the most part, you don't want your ambient lighting to be too low or too high. And one more little thing we're going to cover right now in the cloud layers before we get into the advanced. We've already really covered the advanced material editor for the cloud layers. But you will notice, like I said, there's a difference between the one that we were looking at and the advanced cloud material editor. And this is it right here. In here you're going to be able to see things like the ability to scale roughness, variations, uniformity, which before we had over in this section. Right? And of course there's density modulation, height modulation, which you can of course go into and adjust on every single one of those in the editor, in the function editor. Your volumetric color can be adjusted here as well as your ambient color. Right? So there's quite a few more features within this, which is nice. And the other thing, of course, is when you get a cloud layer the way you like it, go ahead and save it. You can do that by just right-clicking on the layer and saving it. Right? It's very useful and very important that you do this. You're going to make clouds and you're not going to ever be able to duplicate them again, right? Unless you write down all the individual pieces. So it's very important that you save your cloud layers and save them in a place where you can access them again in the future. Alright, and the velocity rate of change is for when you're working with animations. We're not going to get into that in today's tutorial, but in the future Cloud Advanced tutorial series, I will cover that. And also, another thing I'm going to point out here is right here you have scale. Scaling gives you the ability to change the cloud. The closer to the closer you want the cloud to be to your face, the larger you want your scale to be. Right? It is literally going to change the scale within your scene. So, larger the clouds are going to be, the further away they're supposed to be, the smaller the scale you want it to be. It's also going to increase the details. Okay, so if you have a low scale and the clouds are really, really, really far away, it's going to increase the details, and as a result, it's going to slow down your computer. When the clouds are really far away, you can decrease the scale if you like, and if they don't need to be too detailed, and they'll still look pretty good, right? But the closer they are to your face, the more scale, the more details you want to have. So it's a good idea to adjust the scale. It doesn't really matter. Essentially, eventually, you will always reach the same scale by moving your camera closer and further to and from the cloud. But it's better to work with, if you've already got your cloud sized the way you want it and set the way you want it, to just work with the scale. One more thing I want to cover really quickly. We've got this nice little cloud here. That's good. I like that. One more thing I want to cover, and this is probably one of the most exciting things that I want to cover today, is how to add a secondary color to your clouds. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is I want to just make this 300 or 200 meters. It's a little too high for my liking. Okay. Now I'm just making the cloud the way I want it to look really quickly, and then we're going to show you how to do some adjustments to the lighting. Now, for this demonstration, I'm going to get rid of the sunlight. We still have ambient light in the scene. And I'm going to go over here and create a point light. And I'm going to just bring that point light up. I'm going to increase its power to, I don't know, 100%, maybe 200. You want these rays to touch the cloud. Now, the first thing you're going to notice when you create a point light is that the clouds aren't actually being affected by it. That's because this lovely little button right here needs to be pressed. And then suddenly your clouds are being affected by your light, which is great. Now, point lights are kind of useful in conjunction with clouds when you want to get a specific color reflecting off your cloud in a specific way. You can come in here and use IES profiles, which are standard profiles that are used by the lighting industry and also by the film industry to dictate specific colors that you're working with, filters, right? But we don't have too many filters in here. I'm going to go with actually like sunlight, but I'm not going to actually work with any of the IES profiles. I'm actually going to go here and I'm going to select a filter color. I'm going to just go with like a red. Don't go too dark or you'll have some weird colors going on. if I do that, of course, it's going to be a little bit too much. Let's zoom in here. And now you got to keep in mind that working with this is not going to be a standalone. And again, I'm not going to get into too much detail with this because I am going to cover this in my advanced cloud tutorial. But I am going to cover a little bit of this now because it's really useful. And some of you might just be here just to learn about this. So you see, I've just gone ahead and I've colored the clouds with the lighting. Now what I want to do is I only want to affect some of this cloud. So how to do that, of course, is to bring the light in from a specific angle. Notice how it's quite pink. And of course, to get rid of the pink, you want to go darker. Oops. And then we'll bring up that power to 1000. You can just go closer to bring up the power, but I like what the effect is having on the ground as well. And now I can bring down that power to about 500. And I'm going to go ahead and tell this is the light editor. I'm going to tell this to only affect the objects marked below because I don't want it to affect the terrain. I only want it to affect my cloud. And just like that. It's only affecting the cloud now. Now if I go ahead and turn off that point light, that's what my sky looks like. But if I turn that point light back on, it looks much more like we've got some dramatic cloudscapes going on here. And when we put a little bit more effort into the clouds, then of course you're going to get a better result, right? You can add more lighting colors. That orange that I selected there is actually a very intense color, and it'll do a lot for a scene. And you notice how it's just affecting the cloud itself, but it really does ultimately affect everything else as well. I'm just going to give it some time to pre-process here, and we'll have a finished result, and that'll be the end of the tutorial for today. But yeah, so in our future tutorial, we will be getting into how to make proper cumulonimbus and cumulus clouds. I think these are vital aspects of cloud design, and is knowing how to create proper clouds, especially clouds that you can use in production. And so we will get into how to do that in the future. Just give me 1 second here. I have to reopen the program. I have, again, like I said before, I do have a video card that is not recommended by Vue, and because of that, it sometimes has problems. It's good though because it gives you guys, home users that are using Vue just for your own, using the personal learning edition just for the experimentation purpose, or just to have fun or whatever. You'll have the ability to see that it can function. Oh, and I'm rendering in final. Let's go back up to preview here. That's better. Alright, I'll go ahead and turn on the point light. And just for the heck of it, I'm gonna go ahead and deck out the scene a little bit. I'm gonna put directional lights on the just basic. I'm not gonna go in and adjust it and make it look more real. And then I'm gonna increase the sunlight, but I'm gonna decrease the sunlight, but increase the ambience from the sky, and I'm going to increase the height of the sun just a little bit. Right there. And then This won't really affect the scene too much. It will a little bit. Not bad for a preview. Right, you can really see how the light, adding that ambient lighting in there, my secondary light, my point light, really lit up the sky and made it look much more like a sunset would look, as opposed to that red light, red sky at night. Sailors take the light, red sky morning. Sailors warning. Well, that red sky. This is that red sky that we're talking about. It doesn't always happen, right? It's a very desired effect in photographs and in images when you're doing CG design. So that's how you can go ahead and make it. Again, we're doing this in a preview. This is a complete preview. This isn't done with final rendering or production rendering or broadcast rendering, right? This is just done in basic preview render settings, and still pretty good image. I didn't do anything with the terrain. We're not here for terrains today. Just threw a quick thing on, but when you're looking at the sky from the sky perspective and the clouds look pretty cool, right? These are not high-def clouds, like I said in the advanced tutorials. I will be showing you how to do advanced high-def clouds, right? But yeah, that covers today's tutorial, and stay tuned for our next tutorial, which we will be covering the material editor and how to make custom materials. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Andrew with Nucleonis Studios.